What's your story? Whether you're a client or an independent financial advisor, we know you face many important decisions that can affect your and your clients' long-term financial success. Welcome to the WIN Podcast, What's Important Now with Corey Heimensen, accredited investment fiduciary and president of Heimensen Wealth Advisors. In this podcast, Corey helps you identify your goals and objectives through financial education and comprehensive planning, while inspiring you to make better behavioral decisions in your personal finance. With a twist on pop culture and current events, join us as we explore growth and protection strategies for individuals, advisors, and their businesses. Come and discover what's important to you now.
Hello and welcome to the WIN Podcast with Corey Heimensen. Corey, what's going on?
Eric, new day. Excited.
Yeah.
Good to be here. I'm talking in really short sentences. What do you think?
Yeah, I was going to say, I'm going to have to draw this podcast out of you today. Oh, my goodness. Doing fine. Thanks for asking.
Yeah, great.
All right. So we are talking a little bit about mythology. What's this all about?
Yeah, I don't know if we're entering the phase of the podcast where now people think they can come up to me and just suggest a topic for the show.
Heck yeah, we are.
So I guess that's where we're opening the new book to. So yeah, I had somebody come up, longtime listener, first time caller. Is that what they?
That's right. We need to get some callers in here. Yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, she came up to me and she's like, I think it was trying to stump me. Well, that's challenge on, right?
That's good.
She's like, you should talk about mythology and then tie it into finance. So I laughed, and then like 2 days later, I'm like, well, yeah, why wouldn't I? I'm not going to turn down a show topic challenge. Right?
Yeah.
So what I've come up with today, the title is The Mythology of Taxes. Which is right in the wheelhouse of every listener. I'm sure everybody's just super jazzed, right?
There's so many famous books about the mythology of taxes.
There's now that you say that, there's a word for, I don't know what it is, but if you Google something and only one thing comes up as a result, that's like the gold standard of you must have a really cool thing or you've uncovered a gem. You know what I mean? So I don't know if this is going to fall in that camp, but
yeah,
anyway.
This is it. Well, I can tell you the when it comes to finances, I've got one mythology that goes with it that I think pairs well, right? And we're not talking about debt today, except for taxes. It's kind of debt, and it can kind of hurt you, and you can kind of keep you in debt if you're paying a ton of taxes. But is it Sisyphus? Is that his name?
Yeah.
Remember
yeah.
He pushes the boulder like uphill for eternity. That's debt, man. I mean, until you get a handle on it, I think that's a perfect example of debt. You're just like pushing that boulder up, and then I think it slides back down every once in a while. It has to keep pushing because you got to go back and push it up some more.
Yep.
That's how it feels sometimes. And taxes can kind of feel that way too.
Oh, yeah, totally. I think that's totally right. And maybe we need to define mythology for some of the listeners. I don't know. And, basically these are stories about a person or a culture. Sometimes they're religious based or they're from a group of shared beliefs of people. But generally they're not considered to be entirely true, maybe.
Oh, come on.
But they're kind of fun. And some people take this stuff seriously, so, okay. So why don't we go down that path? But yeah, I think Medusa probably is maybe one of the famous characters that people think of when you hear that word, but that's beyond me. I'm going to go off the wall, right? So where I'm starting today is something called the Huma Bird, which is a mythical bird of Iranian legend or Iranian fables.
Okay.
And so this bird is considered to be a bird of fortune, essentially. So if someone sees its shadow or even better, touches this bird, it's a sign of future success.
Wow. Okay.
And so, even just catching a glimpse of this shadow soaring, across the prairie or whatever you want to say is supposed to make a person happy for the rest of their lives.
Nice. All right.
So I mean, that's all feel good, right? Now here's the catch. And this is sort of similar to your story too. Now the legend of this creature though, is that this is a bird that never lands on the ground.
Oh.
And it spends its entire life flying so invisibly high that no one can ever see it.
Oh, like a Chinese spy balloon.
There you go. There you go. Oh, man. And so similar to your story, it's like you have this goal or this picture in your mind, and yet you just can't conquer it.
It's unattainable, yeah.
You can't obtain it. And so my mind then goes to, and part of that's when we're releasing this podcast, we've basically just passed the federal tax filing deadline for this year. So while taxes maybe just left everybody's mind, here we are bringing them right back, back to work, as they say. There's no downtime, and so I think people in the same sense think taxes are a horrible thing. And it's like, how can I avoid taxes? There's got to be a magical solution. Is it this bird that I can never catch or see, or this boulder I can never push high enough, and there's more to it than that. Like a lot of things in life, there's understanding. And if you understand something, maybe it clarifies your picture of it, or maybe it just feels better. I don't know.
This is deep, man. We're getting deep.
Maybe we can lighten it up a little. So our office has developed, we have a document here, and we can shed more light on this at the end of the show, but it's basically 10 common tax myths.
Okay.
And then we can debunk them or, offset them, whatever the right word is,
All right.
And so I have given you a copy of this report, so you can throw the first one at me. How about that?
I will. And before we do that, I've got one more thing, because you brought up Medusa, and now it's just rattling around in my brain. So I've got to get it out of here, right? Medusa is we're talking, the correlation here. Medusa is the IRS. You want to know how I got there?
I was trying, but yeah, I'm going to have to ask you.
Yeah, well, because, if the IRS starts looking at you, people get petrified, right?
Yeah, that's fair.
That's fair. Yeah,
that's solid.
Yeah, solid. I like how you threw that in there. Okay. Onto the myths.
Now I'm gonna piggyback on that one, because I'm visualizing the commercial for we'll call it an online retailer that some people have probably heard of. But anyway, they show Medusa, traveling around, and she's kind of depressed because she's turning everybody into stone. So she buys sunglasses off the online retail store, and then, everybody's happy. So, I mean, you're right. That kind of ties into the IRS. Nobody really wants to see the agent knock at their door, but if they had cool sunglasses on, maybe they'd be more welcoming. I don't know.
Yeah, but then they'd ask for the receipt. I don't know. Keep your receipts for sunglasses, folks. That's, I guess.
There you go.
Learn nothing else from this podcast. All right, well, let's jump into some of those myths. And I know we're not going to be able to cover all 10, but you are giving this as a resource to folks if they email in or call in or whatever. I mean, they can get it from you, correct?
Yeah, they can call in, contact us. We can send this out to them, hard copy, electronic copy. We'll have it kind of in the blog section of our website too. So perfect.
All right. Well, the first one, and I've heard this a bunch, and I think I used to be in this camp a bit, to be honest with you, Corey. Years ago, until I understood how finances worked and how taxes worked and how businesses worked. This is where I was at. Quote unquote, the rich don't pay any taxes in our country.
Yeah. And this is one that we'll blame the media a little bit.
Oh, yeah.
Because there's so many things that, we'll start with a business. I know one of our other later bullet points here is going to talk about business taxes too, but businesses report, or a lot of public companies report their business profit and loss or taxes they pay and things quarterly. And it only takes one media outlet to take a little tidbit from that report and not put everything into context. And and so, yeah, maybe it looks like, that business didn't pay any taxes this quarter. How do they do that? I'm paying thousands out of my paycheck, or, whatever. And people freak out a little bit. But at the end of the day, taxes ebb and flow, so to speak, for individuals and for businesses. And there's a bracketing type system where the more money you make, you pay in a larger percentage as on the dollars on the top end. But you never pay and lose the whole dollar. You know what I mean? I don't care who you are, if you earn $1, you're not going to pay $1 of taxes on that dollar. You know what I mean? So it's still a net making money and having income that you have to pay taxes on is still a win. You know what I mean? And so back to this point, though, statistically, the top 1% of earners in our country pay like a third of all income taxes. And so basically the Americans with the highest incomes do pay the largest share of taxes.
Mm-hmm.
Now that doesn't, for lack of a better professional phrase, doesn't mean squat to the guy or gal that is living paycheck to paycheck and they just feel like they're getting the raw end of the deal. And, that isn't an IRS or that's not a tax problem. There's bigger fish to fry in that whole equation to solve and educate that person or to help them improve themselves to be more employable or to get a raise or, that's a whole nother can of worms or whatever we want to talk about. But the bottom line is that the wealthier people, not just income taxes, we should talk about other taxes too. There's, if I'm running a business, I have payroll taxes for my employees. There's sales taxes on things I buy. We can go on and on.
Mm-hmm.
Bottom line, I was going to say everybody in our country pays taxes. I think that's a pretty fair statement of some kind. You know what I mean? If it's sales tax or property tax or excise taxes. Heck, I've even joked with people that maybe just a consumption tax, of spending, then even the people that, I'm not saying there's tax cheats out there, but essentially if all the taxes in our country were tied to spending, everybody spends money.
Yep.
Even if you, I don't want to sound like we're just talking about non-law abiding citizens, but hypothetically, if you're a business person that just does really bad types of business things that are not legal in our country, you'd still pay taxes if there was a sales tax or a consumption tax because you buy a boat or a fancy car or whatever. I don't know. This really wasn't even where I wanted to go down the path today, but I just get all fired up. And
well, I think it's an appropriate way to go because, again, just talking about the consumption part of it, and again, not trying to derail everything, I think that would encourage people to reuse things and make things last longer, right? Because if you're going to pay a heavier tax, whether you call it a heavier sales tax or just a consumption tax because of what you're purchasing, maybe businesses wouldn't throw out so many things that they, I'm going to get a tax credit for it, so I can just go ahead and get rid of this. There's all sorts of, and we don't call them loopholes, there's all sorts of strategies that these folks are using. And I think I agree with you, the code needs to be changed completely, but the way it's written now, the rich still do pay taxes. Even if some people don't think it's a fair amount, they're still, like you said, 33% or 1/3 of all the taxes collected are from the top 1% of the people. So, yeah.
Yeah. And the thing is that people that earn a lot of money have the ability to put more money into retirement plans or do tax savings or tax management type things just because they have extra cash flow. Mm-hmm. Could the minimum wage worker, pay less in taxes if they could max out their contribution to their retirement plan at work? Yes, but they can't afford to do it. Yeah. And so everybody, and that's why everybody has their own tax return. Everybody has a different picture that's being painted, and everybody's situation is different.
Yeah. Yep. Absolutely. All right. Well, that next myth, which I chuckle at this because I see a lot of videos of people who don't believe they're citizens and things like that, right? They're wanderers or whatever they're calling themselves. There is no U.S. law requiring you to pay income tax, Corey. So why am I doing it?
Hey, I guess a certain percentage of the public just likes conspiracy theories or something.
Yes. Agreed.
This one just blows my mind that anybody can with a straight face, promote a subscription to a newsletter or buy an online report on how you can avoid taxes because it's not a legitimate law in the country. I don't know. And I'm not saying I'm an expert on the U.S. Constitution, but I do know that if I look here and read this, it says the 16th Amendment, was part of the Constitution added in 1913. And it basically says, there's basically 4 bullet points, and these are pretty straightforward, I think. Number 1, it imposes a tax on the taxable income of every individual. Period.
Oh, there you go.
And then the second one defines taxable income as gross income minus allowed deductions. So yeah, you don't pay on every dollar. There might be things that offset some of your income. Mm-hmm. That's pretty straightforward. Number 3 is interesting to me. It defines gross income as all income from whatever source it came from. And so what I think of here is, if I want to go scoop my neighbor's driveway or mow their lawn and then tell them to send me $10 by way of Venmo or PayPal or something, in theory, that's income, and people should pay on that. Now, I'm sure there's a lot of dollars that float in our country in that subsystem or whatever we want to call it, and I'm not going down that path. But
Yeah.
by definition, the amendment is the amendment. And then the fourth one here, it just says the 16th Amendment requires the filing of returns for every person that has gross income. Essentially.
There you go.
I mean, these bullet points are pretty straightforward. So I don't know, unless you're living in a shack in the woods and you're calling yourself your own country. I don't even know how you define that or prove that, let alone win this battle. I don't know.
Yeah. It's a little silly. Let's move on. Well, and I felt this way on this myth. Here we go. A large tax refund is cause for celebration. Now, I'll be honest, Corey, if having the IRS send me a check, it feels pretty good.
I get it. I totally get it. And honestly, there are times when I meet a client and they express this to me, and I say to them, if you like that method and that feels good, that you get a big chunk of money, whatever big means in your universe, in April or May or whenever you get this, if that's the way you like to do it, fine. But then I'll try and educate them and say, what you're really doing is you're having too much money withheld from your paychecks all year long. So it sits in the government in some filing cabinet at the IRS. I don't know, this is extreme, or at the Treasury. And then they give it back to you later and they say, hey, thanks for letting us, kind of hold your money. You could have had it in a savings account. You could have had it in something being productive for you. But, instead we held it for you. And nice job.
Yeah.
The finance person in me with the planning hat says, I just hate that. I want money to be productive for people, whether they're at my office or not at my office, doesn't matter. It's immaterial. You want your money to be productive wherever it sits or whoever you work with. But if you're somebody that just can't manage your money, and if it's in your checking or your savings, you're going to spend that, then this isn't the craziest thing. I don't like it. I don't love it. Don't recommend it, but I understand it. How about that?
Yeah. Well, I'll be honest, and this is not advice by any means, but we actually set it up to where more money was being withheld from my wife's paycheck, for taxes, because as a business owner and owning my own business, I did not, the first 2 years, I had a terrible track record of putting taxes to the side, right? That was a bad thing.
Yep.
So we set it up so we're a bit more taken out of hers. So when I put my money away for taxes and I send it in and all that jazz, we know we're covered. So yeah, we do get a refund. It's not huge, but I don't want to tweak anything because I don't want to have that situation where all of a sudden it's like, all right, I'm probably going to get $400 or $500 back, and IRS is like, hey, you're $78. Oh, dang it!
Yeah,
even that much. I don't want to have to owe them anything. I'd rather it be get a little bit back and not have to send them anything more. So,
yeah, and this whole topic is something that I preach about at my office to my staff and the other advisor all the time, because a lot of the concepts that we deal with day after day after day, they fall into the back of our mind because they're what I'll say elementary, or they're easy for us to understand. And so sometimes we forget to educate clients through the entire alphabet of A to Z. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
What we're talking about right here applies to every individual in the country, essentially, that is actively employed. And so it's easy for us to sit here behind the scenes and say, oh, Jim or Jane, I don't know why they don't just go to their payroll department, HR person, change their withholdings and solve that. They don't, you know what I mean? But we remember then that, hey, not everybody has a huge, awesome understanding of this.
Yep.
Or maybe they understood it 1 year, but then 3 years go by and they change jobs and this or that. Being a good steward of finance and money requires work, essentially, in an ongoing project. And so sometimes I think, oh gosh, we hammer all these items by definition over and over, whether it's the podcast or our newsletters or the books we write or on and weekly videos. I can go all day. But we need to dial it in and keep hitting people with these things because they're important and they make a difference. And that's, hey, at the end of the day, that's what a good advisor is trying to do.
Yeah. Well, I mean, here's the thing: is that you cover so many things on this podcast, Corey. I mean, I don't even know what episode we're on now, but we're well into it, over a year now of podcasting, I believe, and it's something where not everything is going to fit everybody's scenario. The things that you're teaching, I love the fact that every once in a while you'll get a message, you'll get an email. Hey, that part of that podcast really made sense to me. I'd like to talk to you about that. Because it's not the entire podcast necessarily, right? It may not trigger any concerns or questions in someone's mind, but that one little piece is like, oh, wait a second, that might be me, or that could be me, or I'd like to know more about that, so that could be me. Those are the things that we're looking for on this podcast. I think that's why you do this education stuff, because, people are learning little nuggets here and there, and it's changing their lives, honestly.
It's so funny you'd say that. 2 days ago, I run into somebody, hadn't seen him in quite a few years, and he says, boy, I love that podcast when you had that guest on about agriculture. I'm like, huh, well, that was out of the blue. I haven't even seen this guy. And he says hello to me, and about the third sentence out of his mouth, after multiple years of not seeing him, was that.
Yeah.
And while I thought that was a great episode, I don't walk around town going, boy, that was the greatest episode I've ever heard in my life. And yet that one struck home with somebody.
Absolutely.
And like you said, the next one might be perfectly in tune with somebody else. And so that's why it's kind of fun for us we joke about all these tangents and these crazy things that I throw out there. We got to make it entertaining, and we got to hit a lot of ground to apply to a lot of people.
Yeah.
And
absolutely.
You and I are having fun. You know what I mean?
Heck yeah.
Honestly, Eric, I mean this. If nobody in the world was listening to these things, I'd still keep doing them, just because you and I kind of get some laughs every time we do one.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate it. I do too. And I learned a ton from you. So I guarantee there's other people in the world listening to it.
And I suppose we just throw the gauntlet down right now that anybody wants to try and challenge us on a topic and bring it to us, we will podcast it.
Deal.
Within reason. Within reason.
I was going to say, I was hesitant on that. I'm like, well, there are certain topics I'd like to avoid, but yeah. We'll have them screened by the office personnel, and as long as it has anything to do with what Corey teaches, we'll tackle it. Yeah.
Fair. That's fair.
That'd be fun. Yeah. All right. Next myth is, and you kind of touched on this a little bit earlier about businesses. Major corporations pay no tax, Corey. These guys are horrible people.
Yeah. They provide us with goods and services that we all demand and want, and then they come out with headlines and they don't pay their employees enough, or they don't pay taxes. But yeah, we touched on it a little bit. But, not everybody has a background of running a business, whether that's a small business or a massive corporation. A lot of people, if you pair that with a lot of people, don't understand the ins and outs of the tax code, and that's fine. And then another subset of people, probably can't define terms like depreciation or net operating loss carry forward, or, it's a deep ocean. And the tax code, trust me, it's way complicated. Mm-hmm. Could it be simplified? I'm sure it could, but it is what it is. We all play, Point being, businesses can invest money in, say, building a new factory. And then things like depreciation get kicked in, which means you're basically getting a benefit because you spent a bunch of money. Mm-hmm. And the IRS knows that your factory is going to wear out. And it doesn't matter if we're talking about a pickup truck for a farmer or a piece of equipment or a factory. Things over time get worn out and you have to replace them. And so that's what depreciation is basically an allowance so you don't have to pay as much in taxes because the government knows you're going to have to reload and spend more money down the road again. I'm pretty sure that's not the definition on the CPA exam, but I think it's understandable. So, point being, if you read a headline and it says a corporation didn't pay tax, it might be for this year. It might be a temporary thing. Or if they're a multinational, international company, they might have paid taxes in multiple other countries, but not here. There's exchange rates with currency. So you make money in Germany, you pay taxes in America, there's an exchange rate. There are so many things going on. Nobody probably wants to listen to it.
Well, here's the thing is I had this conversation with my son because he was frustrated because of his taxes, and he's independent contractor. He's a mechanic. He makes his own money, but he has to pay his own taxes. It's just like, man, this is, and then I hear about these, corporations don't pay anything. I was like, well, let's talk about that. And I only had to point out one thing to him. I'm like, okay, so take this specific corporation. I said, they're massive. And if they're building, just your example, they're building a factory, let's say, and it's huge, because we have a lot of growth going on right around us. And these buildings that they're building are absolutely enormous. What goes in that building, son? He's like, well, stuff. And I said, but what runs the stuff? What people? Okay. So now they're employing probably 5,000 to 10,000 people in this area, right? So does the government like that? Well, yeah, because those 5,000 to 10,000 people are also paying taxes. Now they all have jobs, right? So it's kind of a shell game sometimes, and it can seem that way, especially when the media spins it. But when you have large corporations that are growing and they're building new places in new states, expanding, that's good for the economy overall, because all those people are paying taxes. All those people that have jobs are also purchasing things from other companies. Then it helps every company out there. So yeah, that's why tax breaks do exist. And he's like, oh, okay, well, that makes sense. And I said, here's the deal. If you become your own business owner and hire a bunch of mechanics underneath you, you're going to get tax breaks. He's like, okay, well, it's a circle.
Oh, it is. It totally is. And that's exactly why states or cities, counties, will offer perks.
Oh, yeah.
On property tax abatements or tax increment financing, things that say, hey, we know that if ABC Corp builds this huge factory, they're probably going to keep running it for a long time. Mm-hmm. To your example, and they're going to have lots of employees. Hey, maybe some of those employees move to our town. Oh, and then they'll use the grocery store, right? And the gas stations. And, economics is like connect the dots.
Yes.
And I love it. That's just the way my mind works. But a lot of people don't think that way.
Yep.
They just look at headlines and get bucky and call it good.
Well, again, I'm blaming the media, just like we talked about before. They do it on purpose, and it gets people all riled up, and they don't tell the whole story, which is kind of unfortunate. But that's what you're for. You're telling the whole story here. I love that.
Yeah, I'm just picturing the nightly news, and they lead with the headline, XYZ Corp didn't pay any taxes. But they hired so many workers, and those workers came to town and built houses, and then their kids went to school. And you can connect all these really great things, and it'd be a feel-good story. But yeah, they don't do that. They
don't do that. All right, next myth we're going to cover: business taxes only affect business owners.
Yeah, and this ties into what you just said. It's trickle down. You got a business owner, they've got employees. And so you can't just give all your employees a raise every year after year after year, because at some point, maybe that certain employee has reached their maximum potential for benefiting the employer. I don't want this to come across in a horrible way, but I mean, if somebody works at a company for 50 years and they got, a 5% raise every year, you start doing the compounding math, and I mean, they'd be making, rocket scientist money, whatever that means.
Yep.
And so sometimes an employee sort of maxes out at a certain point. And so business owners understand this, and they have to manage their business because it's about making money so that they can expand the business, but also so that they can keep those employees, or maybe they can hire more employees, and so then you even think about, if I'm a business owner, do I want to upgrade all the equipment and get a phone system that's better and more computers and things like that? I know I'm spending money and it's coming out of my pocket, but will it put my employees in a better position to improve themselves or be all that they can be and be more productive? That's really what this comes to. We talked about, or we have in previous episodes, productivity of money, or, and things that it's so important for a consumer or an individual or a business owner. Mm-hmm. Because, spending money as a business owner, maybe it lowers your taxable consequences this year, but it makes your employees more productive. Eventually, that allows you to keep improving, building the business, raising salaries. They're paying taxes on that. Maybe they're spending money in public more. I mean, all of this stuff, again, is connecting the dots. And taxes are not a bad thing. How about that?
Yep. It feels bad sometimes, but it's not a bad thing. Things get done. All right. And the last one we're going to cover in the podcast today, Corey, because like you said, you've got the 10 common tax myths. And so if people want the other ones, you're going to give that to them. We'll give contact information here at the end of the show. But the last one we're covering today is expensing is a loophole. And I'm interested to hear what you have to say about this. Yeah,
I think people get excited when they hear, a loophole. I bet that big corporation or my neighbor has a loophole because, they don't have to pay taxes. I mean, and that just comes across as a word that means sneaky to me. You know what I mean? Like they've covered some secret treasure or concept. But, having expenses is common for a business. You know what I mean? And so that doesn't make it illegal to have advertising expense or marketing expense, or if you're self-employed, maybe you have a home office, now I'm not giving tax advice. There's ways to do this properly and things like that and restrictions, but maybe you can have an expense off of your income for home office internet or space or utilities. Again, every situation is different, but point being, and this goes back to the government or the amendment to the Constitution, they only want you to pay taxes on what you're supposed to pay taxes on. So if you have legitimate expenses, that's not a loophole. That's not hiding anything. That's just doing business the right way. And so you don't have to pay taxes on things that are part of expenses to do business, if that makes sense.
Yep, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, sir, this has been fantastic. A lot of great information. We did promise the listeners that they could go or that they'd get some contact info to get the rest of these myths and maybe even start a discussion with you. How do they get a hold of you?
Yeah, wherever you see the podcast or connect your device to it, you'll find our contact information. So you can email us too, but I'll give the phone number, and that's 800-657-4316. And I've got just one last takeaway. And that is basically cost is only an issue if there's lack of value. And basically, to me, that means taxes too. So, we all want nice roads. We want good school systems. We want national defense. We live in a pretty good country. There's a cost. And there's a cost for that. And that means people have to pay taxes.
Yep. All righty, sir. Thank you so much for your time. This has been a fantastic podcast. Love it.
Hey, appreciate it as always.
You bet. And our last thank you, of course, always goes to you, listening audience. Thank you so much for tuning in and listening to the Win Podcast with Corey Heimensen. If you have not subscribed to the podcast yet, please click the subscribe now button below. This way, when Corey comes out with a new podcast, it'll show up directly on your listening device. And we humbly ask you to share this podcast, rate it, and leave a review, as this actually does help others find the show. Again, thank you so much for listening today. For everyone at Heimensen Wealth Advisors, this is Eric Johnson reminding you to live your best day every day. And we'll see you next time.
Thank you for listening to the WIN Podcast. What's important now? The show that helps you achieve your financial dreams. To ask questions about topics covered during the show or get a copy of Stop Doing Dumb Things with Your Money by Corey Heimensen, visit www.heimensenwealth.com or give us a call at 712-472-3867. Don't forget to click the follow button below to be notified when new episodes become available. Securities offered through Securities America Inc., member FINRA SIPC. Advisory services offered through Securities America Advisors Inc. Heimensen Wealth Advisors and Securities America are separate entities.